disclaimer. In this episode, we are kind of like sidetracking, and then there is much more personal thoughts than usual. So it's a bit less scientific, but it's still our podcast. So listen to it. Dude, what is today's topic?
Today's topic is an article about burnout in young people, in millennials.
When you first brought up the topic, my first impression was that, you know what, this, of course, you hear it sometimes. You know, some people burn out, but it's, first of all, it's never the thing that is going to happen to you. So you kind of like, I think most of the people automatically detach, like, yeah, whatever, you know, it's not going to happen to me anyway. And then I think I also had some kind of a disdain that, you know what, come on, man, why are you burning out? Are you weak or something like that? So this was my first impression. And then I read the article and then I was like, oh no, this is about me as well. So the situation is not so good. So yeah, so what I wanted to say is that it's quite surprised because it specifically mentions, right, burnout in millennials. And then I was quite surprised that this is a thing. I was expecting that burnout would be coming sort of like later in life or when the number of responsibilities that you have is higher. Well, what was your impression?
Yeah, that's true that maybe when you hear the word burnout, you're thinking of something very severe or with very high impact. And basically the article says that like it's a spectrum, so it can be a light burnout as well. And you're right, it's very easy to identify yourself while reading this article because many things I think apply to all young people.
So I was thinking that is the burnout actually kind of like a disease that you recover from? Like, you know, you get sick, you take some pills, and then you recover. And then next season, next influenza season, you get sick again. So maybe this is a normal thing. Society is advanced enough to put a name on it. Maybe before we weren't advanced enough, sort of scientifically or psychologically, to put a name on.
Maybe. I mean, here the definition says that it is caused by acute high stress environment, and the longer the exposure, the more severe it is. So is it a disease or it's a condition based on your environment or maybe based on your perception of your environment? I don't know.
Or maybe it's the environment itself. It's not the perception of the environment. This is one of the points I think the article makes, right? Millennials are not burning out because they are weak, but because the conditions in which they have to exist are different. Yeah. So then it's the environment.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's that's one of the points of the article, that it's the system or it's how society works and the expectations basically. And it also says that why you are a bit reluctant to identify yourself as burnout because you're thinking of the severe burnout. But here it says also that it can be a mild burnout if you're not in a high stress environment, just in a medium stress environment, but constantly. And you use up more resources than you have. You want to stop, but you can't stop because there's pressure for you to keep going. So basically in this sense, having an acute or high intensity burnout is better because that forces you to stop because you can't anymore. But with a mild burnout, you can keep going for a long time.
I quite like this. I quite like this. So in the systems modeling community, there's a saying that growth is slow, but collapse is fast. So, and then they often say that this is true for every kind of complex system. Like, for example, if you look at civilizations, the empires grow over 100 years, but they vanish in 10 years. Or if you look at ecological system, a forest grows over hundreds of years, but if a pest comes, it dies in 1 year. New products gain market share over tens of years, but if the replacement comes and it's good enough, they vanish in a year. You can see this in a lot of places. But then what you said is that maybe it's better to crash and burn, because then you have the chance for you to properly sort of reorient your life and give this semi-burnout, or perhaps a difficult burnout by now, the attention it needs. Other than that, you just like continue to drag it, and maybe that's not good. But then how can you identify it? Like, you know, when you're down the slope, you're down the slope. So I don't know whether you can define it. You know what? I'm actually having a mild burnout. So
yeah, this is a bit like the story with the frog. When you put the frog in a boiling water, it will jump out because it notices that, hey, I'm boiling. But if you just put it in cold water and then increase the temperature slowly, it doesn't realize it's getting cooked.
Oh man, I didn't know this one. So you can cook him.
So you can cook a frog like that, yeah. And actually you can cook yourself with this burnout and high stress environment. But back to your question, in this article it says that, okay, so what are the symptoms? And this is the part where I read it and could identify with these things. So it says that one of the symptoms is like procrastination, which results in errand paralysis, which means that you have some seemingly very easy, medium priority task on your to-do list, which is rolling over from 1 week to another, from 1 month to another without you completing it.
And I have tasks which have been like this for 5 years. 5 years, man. And after that, I cannot look myself in the eye and say, you're really that bad that you couldn't take that 15 minutes, 15 pathetic minutes that this task would have required to solve it in 5 years.
Exactly.
So definitely.
Yes. So I think this is something that everyone has. And here he says the examples I like: making a dentist appointment, or sending a package via the post office, or replying to a friend's email about how's life going. Like, all of these things seem easy and they are not super high priority. So they say they are medium effort, low reward tasks. The problem is that these are always competing with more urgent and higher reward and high pressure tasks. So you have to make deliberate sacrifices to do this because, for example, why don't I just finish something in work, or why don't I read an article so I develop more instead of booking the dentist appointment? I mean, this is one of the reasons why you could postpone these tasks. In the article, this was one of the symptoms, which I guess it's very common.
I think this is quite important. I actually have a note here that there is a book called A Deep Work by Cal Newport. He says that the 21st century man has forgotten how to do deep work and has replaced it with shallow work. And then this led to fake productivity. As you say, you have a lot of small petty tasks, and then you tick off a lot of the small petty tasks, which temporarily might feel you sort of lighter. And then you think you have been productive, but in reality, you haven't been doing the actual big task that you needed to do for tomorrow's big presentation. So he said that this is the number one enemy of today is fake productivity. I think this is quite important. So I had another thought that it's actually in today's job market, I think it's very difficult to benchmark what is asked from you, what is needed in your work. I experienced that a lot of times students who go into the workforce, suddenly you have to have a considerable amount of autonomy, and then people just ask, you have to finish the tasks. You have no idea how to do it. So suddenly you get this deep feeling of uncertainty that what am I doing? Is it well enough? You meet the boss once a month, so you have no feedback. You don't know whether what you're doing is good or bad. So I think this is definitely property of the workplace of today, especially now when we're working online. Nobody cares what you do throughout the week. You have one presentation at the end of the week, and then they just ask you, what have you been doing? Okay, that's crap. You shouldn't have been wasting time. And then I think moments like this can set you back so much. And then, of course, it's very easy to ask from there, what am I doing with my life? So don't you think so, that this is sort of like a byproduct of the digital world?
Yes, exactly. And this was also identified in the article, that one of the causes is the uncertainty, which is uncertainty in your job, in general, in the job market, uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about your financial life. Like, this is one of the main causes. Also, I mean, this is very maybe ironic, but at the end of the article, which we will get to, there are some suggestions of what is society suggesting you, that things that help. And one of the suggestions which they say that doesn't work is that it recommends you to read self-help books.
And now we have a flood of self-help books, right?
Exactly, because it's a problem and there's a market for it.
I have to say that I'm somewhat in the trap of having more than one self-help books on the shelf. But some of them are extremely good. So for sure, as long as they make you think, it's good. Because as long as you're thinking, you have a better chance of identifying whether you're in a burnout or not.
Yeah. And I totally agree. It's just that the other argument is that if society or the system would be putting less stress on people, you wouldn't need these kind of books. Like, this book helps but it doesn't solve like the root causes, and it doesn't solve it on scale for everyone.
So it's almost like a fake productivity that, you know what, now I read, currently, for example, I'm reading Atomic Habits, also self-help book, currently the Amazon #1. And at the end, you feel that, oh, you know what? Now I understand. Now I'm going to be amazing. From tomorrow morning, I'm going to be amazing. And what very few self-help books fail to tell you is that change is extremely slow and it has to be extremely consistent. And most people fail. Like, people don't understand. I mean, actually, most self-help books, I think, say that 99% of people who read this book are going to fail. But people don't understand the statistic that you're much more likely to be in the 99%, because everybody sort of has this wishful thinking that, you know what, I'm going to be the 1% who actually is going to follow the advice and change their life. So
this is the opposite of the bias that you said at the beginning. This is the wishful thinking. Oh, burnout is a thing, but it's surely not me. It's other people, and this is like the opposite, that everyone fails, but surely not me. I'm gonna succeed. It's a total bias.
Yeah, I think so. Another thing that I was thinking about exactly with regards to this new workforce is that I think it's hard to benchmark. One of the reasons for burnout is the lack of benchmarking. Like, you might be quite good, man, at what you're doing. It's kind of like the imposter syndrome. So, you might be damn good at what you're doing, but because let's say you go on YouTube, you look at a channel in your particular topic, and then this guy is like kicking ass and he's the best, but he's the best in the world. But you fail to benchmark that, you know what, you don't need to be the best. So maybe compared to him, you look like the pretty shit, but you don't need to be the best in the world from the beginning. You can be later on, but maybe you're pretty good at your workplace. But I think oftentimes this is very sort of like demotivating and causes you stress that, you're not as good as you could be. What do you think?
Yeah, that's totally true. This pressure from social media, or you can't compare yourself to everyone in the world, because you're gonna find out that you're nobody. And maybe it's not good to face it every day, or it's not good for social media to put it in your face every day.
Man, it's gonna push it in your face, especially Instagram, right? It's like you're gonna see the top post.
Maybe people say, okay, but I am not using Instagram. But what about LinkedIn is doing the same? You're looking for a job and you see posts of people that, hey, look, my amazing job.
10 times better than you. This guy applied to the same job.
Yes, and I just exited with my startup and I'm winning. I'm winning life. I'm winning at capitalism. What are you doing with your life?
I think here you have a very good point. You see all these tech entrepreneurs who are 19 and they basically own billions. You forget to normalize that, okay, still there's 100 kids like this in the world out of a population of 8 billion. You really don't feel the scale, but these are the kids that you see online. So you're going to think that, oh, you know what, this guy has $1 billion startup at 19, and what am I doing with my life at 32? So yeah, it definitely doesn't help. That's for sure. Another bad thing that social media does, of course, it doesn't show the fact that, okay, this guy exited from his company at 19, but maybe he's a wreck. Maybe he doesn't sleep at all at night, and maybe he has been to 5 psychiatrists already. You don't see that on social media. So yeah, it's every coin has two sides. Anyway, yeah, age of self-help books and self-inflicted stress as well. Social pressure inflicted stress as well. For sure, it leads to burnout. So you're saying that society has remedies. What would be other remedies?
The remedies that are proposed here are actually the fake ones. Like the author says that, hey, I can't give you a remedy, but I can tell you what other people say or are suggesting and which doesn't work or doesn't work on scale. Because there are some, the proposed solutions are do more yoga. You can do more yoga, but if your work is stressful and your life is uncertain, and that doesn't change with you doing more yoga. Or the classic one is take a vacation. Take some time off, go on a vacation. Well, that's amazing for a week, but then you have to get back to your life. Like, you have to fix your normal life. You can't escape from one vacation to another. Or the ultimate solution is you just get off social media and everything is solved. Well, it's not gonna be solved. Or there's like many life hacks, like zero inbox, Pomodoro, bullet journals.
Oh man, yeah, the life hacks.
You can hack your life all the way, but all these life hacks are just like temporary quick fixes, but they are not solving the underlying cause, which is the uncertainty and the constant exhaustion because of over expectations in your work, in your life, mental load, all the mix of how our modern society works.
The ultimate goal should not be to prevent burnout, but it should be to combat the causes that produce the burnout in the first place. So you should try to, like as you said, if the cause is uncertainty, then you should try to reduce uncertainty instead of planning your day better and feeling good for a way. So maybe this is what you should do. You should try to reduce uncertainty. Well, of course, that's a much more difficult task than feeling good for a way.
And also it's like there's many things which you can't influence, or it's very hard to influence. Like, how can you influence job uncertainty? It's very rare that someone can say that I'm very positive that I'm gonna have a stable job for the next 10 years. Like, you just can't say that because the world is super uncertain. So what does this mean? That, for example, I can't take a loan being calm, or it's just one of the examples. And it's very hard for me to combat this alone.
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect it that I'm really not sure, but I would say that the probability of burning out is proportional with the amount of responsibility that you take in society. Because then if you have more responsibility, you have more options to fail, which will ultimately lead you to think about all the possible ways that you can fail, which will lead to stress, which will lead to burnout. So I'm saying that a kid doesn't burn out because he doesn't have any responsibilities.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's true. I saw a debate once about capitalism versus socialism. Mm-hmm. One of the arguments against capitalism is basically this, that the salary of the CEO is exponentially higher than the salary of the worker, right? But then the defense against that is that, yes, but if the company comes bankrupt, the assets of the company, which are worth many, many times more than the salary of the worker, somebody has to be responsible for that. So the higher up you are in the command chain, the more of that responsibility you are going to take. It's you who go to jail if your company goes bankrupt and you don't know how to clear yourself. It's not the assembly line worker. So I would say that the pressure is proportionally higher at higher up in the command line, if we have a very capitalist mindset, which is how most of the countries operate. But I also understand that it's a different kind of pressure. It's that perhaps the stress that is attached to not being able to provide your kids with what they need is perhaps incomparably higher than losing a business.
Yeah, and why I don't like this argument, because it suggests a bit that, okay, then if you're not in a big position with high stress, you can't burn out. Like, you don't have the right to burn out because you don't have responsibility and choices. You're just a poor worker, so don't burn out. Just do your stuff. You can't burn out.
Don't complain. Just don't complain. Go back to the sweatshop.
Exactly.
Okay, that's
this
fair
is
enough.
Burnout is not a privilege to the C-suite. Only people in the upper management can burn out. No, I mean,
I like this very much. I like this argument. Burnout is a privilege.
But you were very, very right. Like, you were going in the right path with this, like, criticism of capitalism, because the article goes this way a bit. And there was one interesting thing that it said, that in the current system, we value very much the individual. And this is part of maybe the capitalistic mindset or philosophy. And even when we think about these kind of systematic problems, like, let's say that we accept, or everyone agrees, that millennial burnout in young people is very prevalent. It's a common thing. Many people have it. And then what everyone is thinking in an individualistic society is that, okay, but I will fix my life. I will read my self-help books, I will meditate, and I will improve my situation, and I'm gonna be out of the burnout. And maybe you can do that, but imagine just a world where, okay, you're out of the burnout, you're a happy person, but your partner is burned out. Your teachers, your friends, your parents, everyone is burned out around you. So you just fix your life, but all your surroundings, they are still not achieving their dreams, they are still stressed, they are still burned out. Like, would you want to live in that society? Is that a good thing for the people? And we don't realize that we are looking for an individualistic solution, but the problem is not over when you solve your problem. Like, you have to think in communities.
100% agree with that. I think towards the end of the article, it mentions that burnout is sort of like, they say that it's not specific to any of this. They say it's a middle class problem. And I kind of agree with that, because I think what has been happening in the past century, especially in the Western world, I don't know about the rest of the world, unfortunately, but the statistics in the Western world show that staying in the middle class is increasingly harder. So it's harder to buy a house. It's harder to keep a job for a long time. It's harder to get enough money to send your kids to college. It's harder to raise a larger family. So maybe it's an intergenerational problem. Maybe you compare yourself to your parents because this is the natural thing to do, and then compared to them, you see that, oh, you know what? I should be able to do this. And you think that you are failing, whereas you aren't. It's the entire society that changes. So this is what came to my mind when you were saying this, that everybody around you is burning out. It's not just the burnout, it's everything.
That's a very good point, that your closest comparison of how to be an adult are your parents. And if your parents tell you the story that they bought a house when they were 25, it's natural, you're going to start comparing yourself to that. And then you realize that, oh, how much did the real estate prices go up, and how much did the average salary go up, and why is it impossible? And yeah, that's a very easy way to get into this situation of having higher expectations for yourself.
Nonetheless, it's still a problem, but probably you shouldn't be looking at fixing the burnout problem. You should be looking at fixing the vanishing middle class problem. And then, of course, it becomes an impossible thing to fix, or like it's so complicated that you don't even know where to start. So I think this is, as you said, it kind of adds up everything. Everything adds up to this sort of like generic uncertainty.
We touched on many topics, and these are all kind of related, and it's hard to draw a nice, clear picture.
Sometimes there's this guy, you might have heard about him, Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. So he says in one of his lectures that the way to prevent going crazy, try to avoid comparison between yourself and others as much as possible if you want to stay sane. And you should try to compare yourself to yourself, either in the past or perhaps in a possible future. So I think that might be actually quite a good advice. As you said, a lot of what we said is interdimensional comparisons. So of course, this would just solve the individual burnout problem. As you said, everybody around you would be still burned out. But if everybody did this, if everybody took this mindset, then perhaps overall you can have a better situation.
Yeah, that's a very, very good advice to try to follow. Although it's hard to do but I mean you can work on it. Like, of course, if you do yoga or if you meditate or all these things improve your life. It's just that it's not going to be like a quick fix. It's not like, okay, I'm going to go on a vacation and now everything is going to be solved. That's the problem when you have expectations like this, that I have all this stress and all these problems, so I need a quick fix to fix my burnout so I can keep going. Well, that's the wrong expectations.
Have you felt that at any time in your life that, you know what, this is the time where I need to put on the brakes and go to the woods for a week?
No, it didn't hit me at that high level that I had to stop.
Or maybe you're just in the gradual situation.
I think I'm in a gradual.
You're already dragging so much that you don't realize.
I didn't identify an acute symptoms, but I mean, I think it applies, and I think it applies to many people.
I think it's also a problem where you said it in the very beginning, that people are reluctant to accept it. Is this something that is going to happen to me? You're like kind of like you self-stigmatize to some extent. I think I might have fallen into that trap, because at times I was like, man, this is not going in a good direction. But yeah, I'm not going to burn out. It's not me. But as you said, all that you do is you procrastinate. Until, life will make you realize it's just going to be a much harder landing. So it's not a good strategy.
But then before, when we were talking, you said that once you had to stop, or you...
Yeah, but I would qualify that. So once I think it was like two years ago, when I just had a lot of things at the same time happening. And then I think for the first time in my life, I missed an actual professional deadline, an important deadline. So that made me reflect so much that, like, this is not me, and I'm like out of character. So then I had to stop. But it wasn't like going remote off the grid. I just took a trip over the weekend, and then Monday morning I went back to the same things. So it wasn't hard enough, I think. I wouldn't say that it was hard enough. This guy in the Atomic Habit, the book that I'm reading now, says that the only way to combat this problem is to get rid of false expectations. So typically people, he talks about New Year's resolutions. Now it's kind of like close to the New Year, right? So many people might have had New Year's resolutions, the gym membership always goes up and things like that. So he says that the problem with that is that you want to go from zero to hero in one step. You got to say that, until now I was a lazy ass. And then from this year, man, I'm going to work out every day 1 hour. He says that instead of saying that, you should say that every day I'm going to work out for 1 minute. And in the beginning, it seems pathetic. Like, you're like, really, 1 minute, this is all I can manage. But he says that's why he calls it atomic habits, that you should aim for a small change. Because then at least it's sustainable, or at least it has a potential to be sustainable. So maybe that's also the burnout remedy.
I have here one more thing, and this is a video from School of Life about meritocracy. Meritocracy is the idea that everyone should be rewarded based on their merit, based on their worth. It's like an idealistic worldview, and many people support it, and I was also in favor of it. Like, I didn't see what could be the problem with this. This video explains very well that this thinking has a darker side. I mean, the first problem is that how do you measure merit? And currently our society measures it by money, how much money you make and how much money you have.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's the first disconnect, that money shouldn't determine how much a person is worth. But in today's world, basically, that's the default, that you talk to someone and, hey, what do you do? So this is the first part where the system is broken. But then what this suggests is, if someone is rich and successful, then they are probably worthy. But if someone is poor or someone is unfortunate, then it's their fault. And I should not help that person because that's the person's fault. Why is he or she not more hardworking? Why is he or she not more intelligent? Before the meritocratic idea, if you see someone unfortunate, your first thought is, I should help that person. But in a meritocratic worldview, when you see someone poor, your first thought is, if someone's poor, then they are not worthy and they are not worth my help, and I should focus on making myself more worthy and not helping the other one. Like, you look down with contempt on the unsuccessful people. And the problem with this is that you have to realize that in life, life is random and it's based on luck. So you're not successful because you're super good. It's because luck and a bit of hard work maybe. And that's the main factor when someone is unfortunate as well. So meritocracy has a problem.
When you opened a beehive, it's an entire beehive. I didn't think that we're going to go to me. I will try to open up the thought in a minute. But to me, this is like very basic societal operational question. Like, this is basically capitalism versus socialism, and then it goes like all the way to the biggest questions, just from the burnout. So for me, it's very, very interesting. So my first thought is that there's a disconnect between success and the metric that we use, and the metric is wrong. Then we discussed it, I think, many times, that, well, if you let a complex social system evolve and optimize itself, it's going to optimize for the metric, not necessarily the desired outcome. So we are optimizing for the metric. More money, we make systems that produce wealthier people if you play the game well, but not necessarily more successful people, or what we would regard. Perhaps because I would say that the dimension of success is also, having a happy family, having, being respected in society. So it's not just the one number, the money side. The money,
exactly. Or for example, there's never a discussion of who is the kindest CEO in the world. There's never an article like this. There's an article who's the richest right now, and you always know who's the top 3 richest because that's the most important person. But you don't know, like, who gives the most to charity, or who is the most kind as a person. Who did
even, man, you fell into your own trap, because even who gives the most to charity, it uses the wrong metric. It's you should be asking, like, who has the biggest impact on changing some people's lives, I guess, or something like that.
That's true. I'm a victim of my own thoughts.
So I think this is one of the big problems. And then there's actually a very, very nice research paper in PLOS ONE by Alessandro Vespignani from Northeastern. He's a colleague of Barbashi, and he has an article called Meritocracy versus Topocracy, to each according to its degree. And what the article says is that effectively, reward in society, it's a mixture of meritocracy and topocracy. By topocracy, what he means is that reward is more proportional to the position that you occupy in the social network rather than your skills. If the system is more meritocratic, then you get rewards proportional to your skills. But if the system is more topocratic, then you get rewards proportionally to your position and like how well connected you are. And then he says that this balance kind of like changes. It's very, very difficult to benchmark. It kind of like changes with industry. And then I think this is the same idea that Barabashi uses in his book, The Formula, where he talks about the measure of success. And then he says that there are two measures. There's the performance measure, which is this objective measure, but this only exists for situations where you can clearly measure the performance. Like, I don't know, if you're a runner, clearly you run the 100 meters in 10 seconds. That's an objective measure. But if you're a painter, this objective measure is not there. Like it's much more difficult to determine. So he says the other measure is sort of like socially accepted success, like fame, something like that. And then he says also that true success is the combination of two. And then most of the jobs, it's very difficult to have this meritocratic objectivity. So what I would say that, yeah, maybe if you look at the measure of success only as being money, maybe that's true. But the way that you go towards obtaining that money is not necessarily meritocratic. It might as well be that you need to be a well-rounded person. Like if you're not nice to someone, they're not going to give you the promotion that will give you that will get you the more money. So maybe overall the system is actually more complex and it has better, less meritocratic aspects built into it, which I don't necessarily agree with, because then the conditions of progress are not defined, right? You don't know what leads to progress. Maybe that's a system that is not transparent. So anyway, the reason that I said that this is sort of like goes back to capitalism versus socialism is that because I would say that the typical capitalist, or I would say even conservative defense of capitalism is that, yeah, if you work harder, you should have more. And then is exactly as you said, those who are poor is out of their own fault. The opportunities lie open to everyone, right? Or this is kind of like the typical argument. And then I 100% agree that with you that perhaps that's true in most of the cases, but in some cases it's not true. So but then what do you do? And then this becomes a question of, okay, so you need to level the playing field. But how do you level the playing field? You need to take from somewhere in order to give somewhere. And then we cannot flesh this out in the podcast. This is the number one question of today. And it has been for the past 30 years, right?
But there's going to be changes coming because it's obvious that the system has problems, especially now with the lockdown and businesses being stopped. Like there's obvious holes in the system which need to be fixed. We don't know how, but we hope that someone figures it out.
The way to fix it is, first of all, to talk about it. That, the system is not perfect. Because I really believe that, well, I don't know, during peak communism, probably everybody thought that communism is the best. And during peak capitalism, probably everybody thought that capitalism is the best. But yes, there's no sort of silver bullet, right?
For example, for me, it was because I had this idea that meritocracy is perfect. What's the problem with that? Like the idea, the philosophical idea. And then this video kind of showed me that it has a problem. And the problem is that life turns out on luck. Many things. I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose my parents, my education. I didn't choose my genes. I could have some disease. There's so much luck which we don't consider. And there's like this dark side of the philosophy. So it made me change my mind. And more fundamental is to change how you view these kind of things, to change your attitude.
I think this is the key thing here, that you should challenge people to change your mind. And then I think this is what we don't do. And social media doesn't help with this at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't help you change your mind. It helps you to confirm what you think. And then, of course, it becomes only about capitalism or socialism, because you're gonna drift towards the extremes. And then no system is going to function in a perfect meritocracy, as you said, or even in a perfectly flat hierarchy. Yeah. It's not going to work. So it has to be some kind of a blend. And then I think it's exactly as you said. It's our capacity to change our mind is what makes this blend function.
That's very interesting. And I'm wondering, how can that be propagated or accelerated, that experience to change your mind? How can you scale changing your minds, changing people's minds?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. That's a tricky one. I think by promoting debate, but educated debate, by promoting speech, you need to speak in order for somebody to change your mind. You need to understand what they're saying. So I've been trying to tell this to my students all the time in university. Forget about what you learn at university. It's not important. The subject, not important at all. Try to speak, formulate ideas. Because I think, as you said, it's really missing. Yeah. It's really hard. But I really liked what you said before, and I think it kind of goes back there, that there is a random element that you cannot circumvent. You have to take note of it, that there is a factor of randomness, and then you have to play with the cards that you have been dealt.
Exactly. Veritasium came out with a video which is like the role of luck in your life or something. And for example, in that one, it said that even when you think of very objective and very measurable things like short distance runners, which you can measure how fast someone runs, and you would think that the best runners hold the world records. And it turns out that all the world records are held by very good runners, but they were measured in occasions where there was a tailwind. So even in that, to break the world record, you need the luck that you need to run on a day when there's tailwind. And you can say that I'm the best runner in the world. And by the way, the weather helped me because there was a tailwind. Yeah, and this can be connected to... So what happens when you have an educated workforce, but because of automatization, the jobs are less and less? So what happens is that basically now, if you post a job, maybe 100 people qualify. And who will you hire? It's based on luck, based on connections, based on looks, based on first impression, based on are you sick that day or the interviewer didn't eat before the interview. And there's many things like this where many people could do many of the jobs, but who will get it at the end, or who will get the ones which are trendy? And you have to accept that there's a huge factor of luck, even more than you would like to accept, because we are raised in this individualistic society, and you think that, but I'm worth it. Like
if I'm working hard, I should get the reward for that, right?
Exactly. And if you get it, you're like, okay, I worked hard and I was rewarded. But you should always have it in your back of your mind, and everything went your way, by the way.
So I think this is a very valid point. I might have a response then. Okay, so if the world becomes probabilistic, then perhaps we should too. So then the metric that you regard as success shouldn't be the acceptance of the job that you applied for, as you said, because there's going to be 10 exactly like you, and then the pick is going to be random. So then maybe you have to internalize this uncertainty in your metric of success. So if you know that the typical success rate is 100, then you should only start failing after you have sent 100 CVs to, let's say, similar caliber jobs. You bake the statistic into the metric of success. Of course, it's very difficult to do, as you said, in an individual society. But then maybe you have to become more tolerant to failure, just because this is what probability says that it should happen, or it will happen inevitably. It's typical with university applications. Like if you know that, let's say, I don't know, Stanford's acceptance rate is 5%, then you know that I'm not going to send the university application only there. I'm going to send it to 20 others, potentially with higher acceptance rates. So I think in some societal processes, we do this naturally. We do this sort of like diluting of the expectation natural, but we don't in some others.
Okay. I see that you can improve your chances and lower your expectation if you start thinking in this probabilistic way. So that's a kind of a solution, but it doesn't solve the problem of if there's a mismatch on supply and demand.
But it might solve burnout, because it will lower your stress, because your expectation of failure will be in line with the metric. So there's not going to be a disconnect between your perceived success and your actual success. If you just get the one job out of 100, let's say in a current mindset, you're going to feel like a failure. But that's actually the norm. This is what you should be expecting. So your stress level, if your mind is calibrated, perhaps over a generation or two, it's not going to be instant, of course.
I mean, if you take this to the extreme, then this becomes like a Buddhist monk mentality, which is I have no expectations for life. I'm in the present moment. I'm doing the things, and I'm happy, and I'm not burned out.
Yeah, but I would say that the Buddhist monk mentality has persisted over thousands of years, and it's still around. You know, there must be a utility to it.
But maybe it would be interesting to see the percentage of people burned out from millennial Buddhist monks versus millennials in the Western civilizations.
I would even see the general influence of religion. What would be the burnout in sort of religious people versus agnostic people? I would expect the difference, because I think if you're religious, especially if you're very religious, some of that decision-making stress is taken off of your shoulders and put on I would say God's shoulders. Like, this is how it should be. Or like basically some of the action is not yours. So you're kind of like, you're cheating in some way, a little bit from a responsibility perspective.
Are you suggesting that religion religion is just an externalization of your stress and uncertainty.
I'm not saying that it's just that, but it's potentially...
It potentially helps with that. Yeah, that's a very good point.
I'm not sure. I mean, we don't know the statistics, right? It might be that they burn out even more because they fear the wrath of God. I mean, it's perfectly possible. Like, then you start failing not just based on your own measure, but also an external observer to which you also have to perform. So it might be even worse. I don't know. It would be interesting to look at.
Yeah.
I would also be curious about the office layout is being optimized all the time. So there might be 100 studies on this. Just the simple fact of whether you have a monitor facing the crowd or facing the wall. Do you have a higher chance of burning out or not? Like, does this produce extra stress on you? But okay, I had another thought here. I also think that, as you said, we have been worshipping the individualist success. So what that produced is that society likes to sort of raise the stars on the pedestal. We have all these lists of Forbes, 30 under 30 and extreme success. It's always very, very mediatized. And then they fail to say in the asterisks that the likelihood of this is extremely low. It's like perhaps 1 million times lower than you think it is. You have no idea how much of 1 million is. So, probability breaks down at the extremes. We don't understand what's the measure of 1%. We really have no idea of what's the difference between 50% and 1%. It's very difficult. Our brains are not built like that.
The best argument against people not understanding probabilities and statistics is lottery.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's a money-making machine. So then I have to retract what I said before. You're not going to send 100 CVs because after 10, you're going to burn out. So it's, obviously people still do, but it's a very difficult argument to make for yourself that I'm not so sure it's even possible to remedy this because, we have had mathematics education for a long time in schools, right? And then even probability we teach for a long time, and people still don't understand how do interest rates work. These are difficult concepts. I think our brain is trained. Probabilities are percentages, and percentages are exponential if you raise them to a power, right? And our brains are very linear. So they don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah, I think that's our minds are not built for this. You can try to force it and you can learn it, but it's never gonna be automatic or obvious or widespread, the usage.
Maybe we are not advanced enough to understand how our minds work so that we could teach it, because we definitely cannot teach it, I think, yet. But I would stay optimistic and say that maybe not. It's not all a lost cause. Man, we sidetracked a bit from Burnout, but it was nice.
Yeah, reading this article, I wrote many notes because it gets into many topics, so you get a lot of ideas.
Yeah, even now, even while we were talking, I wrote like half a page. It's very complex. The problem is that every time I realize it, that we have an episode, is that I'm so dumb. Like, if you would actually want to discuss just one particular little idea, you could spend 2 days discussing only the idea. And I feel like ashamed that, man, I should have known this, but I don't. That's a problem. I'm gonna burn out because of this.
yeah, like you can't expect yourself to be perfect. You have to accept that we are limited, and the opinions and ideas we discuss here are gonna be presented in a limited format. This is the best we can do.
The philosophers say that this is the gateway to wisdom. Realizing that you're dumb is the gateway to wisdom. So it's a good path.
As a closure, I was thinking of so we were talking about burning out and being successful versus being unfortunate, and then what can you do to kind of change this or reverse this. And then maybe one thing you could do, if you're in a position where you're privileged, you can acknowledge more that you were lucky, and this leads you to being more humble and treating others or situations being more grounded.
Kurzgesagt has a very, very nice video. It's called Gratitude. He says that, in order to prevent yourself from going down a slippery slope in life, you have to exercise gratitude, which is exactly what you said. You have to, be grateful for the perhaps small, it might be very tiny, but some positivities that you have in your life. And then you have to acknowledge, even if the success is small, you have to acknowledge the successes. And then he even has a journal for it, a gratitude journal. I ordered one of them. And then I looked at it, and then obviously I procrastinated and I didn't write anything in it. But if I would have, probably it would have prevented me from burning out. No, seriously, I think it's good. I think it's good. You have to give have you cut yourself some slack, man.
Yeah.
The situation's quite okay. It's not that bad.
One other thing which just came to my mind, the individual versus the community. So maybe if you notice and you acknowledge that you're in a hole and there's no clear advice or easy advice which can help you, but you could try is, instead of focusing on trying to fix for yourself, try to focus on fixing for others, because that can be unexpectedly uplifting, that shifting the focus, and it might get you out of tricky situation.
Man, I think that's good advice. So fulfillment can come from a lot of ways, not just money.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Not just money and not just for yourself.
But in all seriousness, like, I think that's why donating money works. So you feel that you did some good with someone else. Yeah, man, this is a difficult topic.
Yeah.
But I like it.
Yeah, it's difficult. It touches on a lot of things, and it's definitely less scientific than the other episodes. But well, you get what you get.
Yeah, but it's you have to have the human touch to get the followers. You know, you have to put some tears, everything. You have to we have to be human.
You have to show you're vulnerable.
Exactly, you have to show. Oh, man, that's exactly.
You have to show that even strong men cry.
And burn out.